Life's never handed me anything on a silver platter. My name's Anna, and by the time I was 6, both my folks had passed, leaving me in the care of my grandma. She was tough as nails, but with a heart of gold. We didn't have much, but she made damn sure I never felt wanting for love. Education? Well, that was a luxury we couldn't afford. I learned to read and write, but school was a dream that ended when I had to start working to help out. I ended up waitressing at a diner downtown, a place where the tips were as meager as the hopes of ever getting out of there. But it paid the bills, or at least some of them, and it kept me on my feet. That's where I met James. He walked in one rainy afternoon, all drenched and looking like something out of a magazine with his fancy suit and that lost look on his face. "Can I get a coffee, black, and maybe a slice of your best pie?" he asked, shaking off the rain. "Sure thing, coming right up," I replied, trying not to show how his smile made my heart skip a beat. James was from a different world, one where people didn't worry about their next meal or whether they could afford the rent. We got to talking, him with his curious questions about my life, and me, well, I was just being my straight-up self. "So, what's a guy like you doing in a dive like this?" I couldn't help but ask. "Just passing through, looking for a bit of real life, I guess." He chuckled, that smile never leaving his face. "Real life, huh? Spend a day in my shoes, you'll get more real life than you bargained for," I joked back, not really expecting him to understand. But he surprised me. He kept coming back, not just for the coffee, but for the conversations. We talked about everything and nothing, and somewhere along the line, I started to fall for him. Hard. James introduced me to his world, one I never knew existed. Fancy dinners, parties where people talked about things I barely understood, and yet, he never made me feel out of place. He was different, kind, and genuinely interested in me, not just my story. Then there was Eleanor, James's mother. The first time I met her, I knew she was sizing me up, her eyes sharp, missing nothing. "So, you're the girl who's caught my son's attention," she said, her voice cool, her gaze even colder. "Yeah, guess I am," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Well," was all she said, turning her attention back to James as if I was no longer there. It was clear from the get-go she didn't approve of me. I was too simple, too uneducated, too everything she didn't want for her son. Eleanor's disdain wasn't the silent type. It was loud, clear, and made its presence felt every single time she walked into a room. If there was one thing I learned quickly after marrying James, it was that his mother, Eleanor, had an opinion on everything. And she wasn't shy about letting you know exactly what she thought, especially if it involved me. Living under the shadow of her disdain was like walking on eggshells, only the eggshells were made of glass, and I was barefoot. Every dinner, every family gathering, she had a way of making her disapproval known, her words sharp enough to cut through the thickest skin. One evening, James and I invited her over for dinner, a simple affair. I had spent the day cooking, trying to make everything perfect, hoping, foolishly, maybe, that I could win her over with my culinary skills. The moment she stepped through the door, I knew it was going to be a long night. "Oh, you decided to cook, Anna? How quaint," she remarked, her voice dripping with condescension as she glanced around our modest living room. "Yeah, thought we'd have a nice family dinner." "Sit down, make yourself comfortable," I replied, forcing a smile, trying to keep the peace for James's sake. James, bless him, tried to smooth things over. "Mom, Anna's been working hard on this meal. Let's just enjoy the evening, okay?" Dinner was a battlefield. With every dish I served, Eleanor had a comment. "This is interesting, Anna. Not what I would have chosen, but I suppose it's edible." I clenched my jaw, counting to 10 in my head. "Glad you think so. Tried something new tonight." James shot me a sympathetic look, his way of saying, "Just ignore her." But ignoring Eleanor was like trying to ignore a hurricane in your living room. The real kicker came when we were talking about Lily's upcoming school year. "I've been looking into schools for Lily," Eleanor began, her tone suggesting she had already made decisions. The local public school simply won't do. A girl of her potential needs the best education we can provide. I felt my hackles rise. James and I have been discussing schools. We think the local school is just fine. Eleanor turned her sharp gaze on me. Anna, with all due respect, what do you know about education? Your background doesn't exactly scream expertise in the matter. That stung. I could feel James tense up beside me, but before he could say anything, I jumped in. My background might not be fancy, Eleanor, but I know plenty about making the best out of what you've got. Lily will be fine. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. After Eleanor left, James tried to apologize. Anna, I'm sorry. She's just set in her ways? Yeah, I've noticed, I interrupted, not wanting to hear excuses for her behavior. It wasn't just the dinners or the snide remarks about my cooking or our home. It was the way she treated me, like I was an inconvenience, a mistake her son had made. But I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. I had faced tougher things in my life than Eleanor's disdain. What bothered me most was the way she talked about Lily, as if I had no say in my daughter's upbringing. The thought of her undermining me with Lily, teaching her to look down on where she came from, made my blood boil. James was caught in the middle, I knew that. He loved his mother, but he loved me and Lily too. We'll figure this out, Anna. I promise, he said, pulling me into a hug. Eleanor's idea of music lessons for Lily felt more like a military operation than anything resembling fun. She'd march into our home, piano books in hand, a stern look on her face that would make a drill sergeant proud. Lily, bless her heart, tried to look excited, but I could see the dread in her eyes. It broke my heart. One afternoon, after another one of these so-called lessons, Lily came to me, her little face scrunched up in distress. Mommy, do I have to keep doing piano with Grandma? She gets mad when I mess up. It's not fun. I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. Hey, it's okay. You don't have to do anything that makes you unhappy. Let me talk to Grandma, okay? Lily nodded, wiping away a tear. It was the last straw. I decided it was time for a showdown with Eleanor. That evening, when Eleanor was about to leave, I stopped her at the door. Eleanor, we need to talk about these music lessons, I said, my voice steady but firm. Oh? What about them? She replied, her tone icy, as if she already knew where this was going. Lily's not happy. She's stressed and upset after every lesson. I thought these were supposed to be fun for her. Eleanor scoffed. Fun? Music isn't about fun, Anna. It's about discipline, about learning to appreciate the finer things in life. Something you'd know nothing about. I felt my cheeks flush with anger. Listen, I appreciate you wanting to teach Lily, but not like this. Not at the cost of her happiness. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. And what do you suggest? Letting her quit. That's the problem with your generation. Too quick to give up. No wonder you ended up where you are. That stung. More than I wanted to admit. It's not about giving up. It's about not forcing her to do something she hates. There's a difference. Eleanor shook her head, dismissive. I won't stand by and watch my granddaughter waste her potential. If you're not interested in her future, I certainly am. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat down with James. We need to talk about Eleanor and these piano lessons, I started, trying to keep my voice even. James looked up, his expression wary. What about them? Lily's miserable, James. She's scared of making mistakes because your mom's too hard on her. She's losing her love for music. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. Mom just wants what's best for Lily. You know how she is with perfection. I felt my frustration rise. But at what cost? Our daughter's happiness? There was a long silence before James spoke again. I'll talk to Mom. But Anna, you know how she is. She's set in her ways. Maybe we just give it a bit more time? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. More time? James, our daughter is unhappy. He didn't meet my gaze. I know, but Mom's heart is in the right place. Let's not make a big deal out of this, okay? We'll work it out. Just give it some time. The conversation ended there, but the issue didn't. James did talk to Eleanor, or so he said, but nothing changed. If anything, the lessons became more frequent, as if Eleanor was doubling down in the face of my concerns. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate music, it was the way Eleanor lorded over Lily, pressing her own brand of perfection onto her, that rubbed me the wrong way. But Lily was a trooper, and somehow, she managed to find joy in the keys, despite her grandmother's heavy-handed teachings. As our wedding anniversary approached, James and I decided to throw a party. Nothing too fancy, just a gathering of close friends and family to celebrate another year of us. The planning was going smoothly until Eleanor threw us a curveball. I've arranged for a special performance, she announced one evening, her tone leaving no room for argument. Lily and I will be playing a duet. You'll need to rent a stage and a piano. James and I exchanged a look. A piano? He echoed, clearly taken aback. Yes, James. And make sure it's a grand piano. We'll be playing arpeggios, something Anna here might not be familiar with, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension. I felt my cheeks burn, not from embarrassment, but from anger. The nerve of her, to assume I didn't know what arpeggios were. My grandmother had made sure I was as comfortable with Bach and Beethoven as I was with a frying pan and spatula. But I'd kept my musical skills a secret, a piece of me that I cherished privately, away from judgmental eyes. Not even James knew. But I swallowed my pride and bit back the sharp retort on the tip of my tongue. This wasn't about me or Eleanor. This was about Lily, and if playing this duet made her happy, then I'd move heaven and earth to make it happen. Sure, Eleanor. We'll make sure there's a stage and a piano, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside me. Eleanor looked satisfied, her smile sharp as a knife. Good. It'll be educational for you, Anna. A chance to see what real music sounds like. I forced a smile, imagining the look on her face if I sat down at that piano and let loose with a Chopin nocturne or a Debussy prelude. But this wasn't the time for showing off. This was about giving Lily a moment in the spotlight, away from the shadow of her grandmother's expectations. James, bless him, was clueless about the tension. It'll be great, babe. Lily's excited about it, he said later, wrapping an arm around me. I nodded, leaning into his embrace. Yeah, it'll be something all right. As the day of the party drew closer, I found myself feeling more anxious than excited. Not about the party itself, but about that performance. It was a reminder of how much I'd kept hidden from my own family, and of the delicate balance we maintained to keep the peace. The party was in full swing, laughter and chatter filling our backyard, transformed for the night into a slice of celebration. James was mingling, playing the host with an easy charm that made me fall for him all over again every time I saw it. Lily, dolled up in a dress that sparkled under the fairy lights, was buzzing with excitement and nerves about her upcoming performance. I was fussing over the last-minute details when Eleanor made her grand entrance, draped in elegance, but with that ever-present air of scrutiny. Anna, dear, is everything set for our performance? She asked, her eyes darting around, assessing everything with a critical eye. Yep, all set. The piano's tuned, and the stage is waiting, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Inside, my stomach was a bundle of knots. This whole setup was Eleanor's show, but it was Lily I was worried about. As guests settled, Eleanor decided it was time. Let's not keep our audience waiting, she announced, herding a reluctant Lily towards the stage. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Eleanor stepped onto the stage, her heel caught on a loose cable. Time slowed as she stumbled, a gasp escaping from the crowd. Instinctively, she reached out, trying to steady herself on the piano, but instead, she tumbled, landing awkwardly on her arm. The music halted, replaced by murmurs of concern. James rushed to his mother's side, his face etched with worry. "Mom, are you all right?" he asked, as I hovered nearby, unsure of what to do. Eleanor, ever the prideful matriarch, brushed off the concern with a strained smile. "I'm fine, just a little mishap." "The show must go on," she insisted, though her voice betrayed a hint of pain. James wasn't convinced. "Maybe we should cancel the performance, Mom. You need to get that checked." But Eleanor wouldn't hear of it. "Absolutely not. We've prepared for this, and we will perform," she said, her tone brooking no argument. I glanced at Lily, who looked more frightened than ever. I wanted to scoop her up and tell her she didn't have to go through with this, but Eleanor was already positioning her at the piano. The performance started, and it was clear from the first note that something was off. Eleanor's playing was hesitant, the fluid grace she usually possessed replaced by a stilted awkwardness. The pain from her fall was evident in every note she missed, every chord that came out wrong. A murmur ran through the assembled guests as the performance went on. It wasn't long before some couldn't hide their amusement, their whispers turning into barely suppressed chuckles. The sight of Eleanor, always so poised and in control, struggling to play basic arpeggios because of her injured arm was, I had to admit, a bit funny in a tragic sort of way. But my heart went out to Lily, caught in the middle of this farce, her eyes darting between the keys and her grandmother, a look of sheer panic on her face. The performance, meant to be the highlight of the evening, turned into a comedy of errors, with Eleanor's pride leading the charge. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. There she was, trying to maintain her dignity in front of an audience that found her predicament amusing. It was a humbling moment for someone who seldom found themselves anything less than perfect. As I watched Eleanor stumble away from the piano, her pride taking a hit right in front of everyone, I was torn. Part of me thought, well, it's about time she came down a peg or two. But then, seeing her trying to blink away those tears of frustration, my heart softened. She might be all sorts of difficult, but she didn't deserve to be humiliated like that. And Lily, my sweet girl, looked so upset by the whole ordeal, I couldn't bear it. Eleanor, her face a mask of disappointment mixed with pain, slowly moved aside. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't about to let the evening end on such a sour note. Not if I could help it. So, there I went, taking a seat at the piano beside Lily, who looked at me with wide, questioning eyes. "Just follow my lead," I whispered to her, giving her a reassuring smile. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, curious, maybe even a bit skeptical. We started to play, and it was like magic. The notes just flowed, perfect and clear. For a few minutes, there was no Eleanor, no awkward tension, just me, Lily, and the music. I could hear the surprise in the room, the shift in the atmosphere as we hit our stride. The applause that followed was thunderous, especially from James, who looked like he might burst with pride. But it was Eleanor's reaction that caught me off guard. She was standing there, tears streaming down her face, but this time they were different. There was something like respect, maybe even a hint of regret, in her eyes. I had no idea you could play," she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the buzz of the room. "A lot of things you don't know about me," I shot back, half teasing, half serious. It was a moment of triumph, sure, but it was also a bridge, a way to show her there was more to me than she'd ever given me credit for. Lily, ever the showman, took her little bow, her face lit up with a mix of relief and joy. And as the applause died down, I stayed seated at the piano, my fingers resting lightly on the keys, ready for the next piece. "Wow, Anna, that was incredible." "I had no idea," James said, his voice filled with wonder and something akin to disbelief. Eleanor cleared her throat, stepping closer, her gaze fixed on me. "Anna, I must admit, that was quite a performance. You and Lily, you played beautifully together." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her concession. "Thanks, Eleanor. Music's always been a big part of my life. Just never had the chance to show it off like this." The guests murmured their agreement, some still clapping softly, their smiles genuine and encouraging. It was a rare moment of unity, the usual tensions forgotten in the wake of our shared experience. Lily tugged at my sleeve, her earlier shyness replaced by excitement. "Mom, can we play another one? Please?" I looked down at her, her enthusiasm infectious. "Sure, kiddo. What do you say we give them a little Beethoven?" The mention of Beethoven caught Eleanor off guard, her interest piqued. "Beethoven, you say? I didn't realize you were familiar with his work." "There's a lot of things about me you're not familiar with," I shot back, not unkindly. I turned to the guests, who were watching our exchange with a mix of amusement and curiosity. "Everyone, we hope you enjoy this next piece. It's one of our favorites." As Lily and I launched into the first few bars of Für Elise, a piece so familiar yet always capable of evoking deep emotions, the room settled into a hushed reverence. The music flowed from us, a testament to hours of practice and a shared love for the piano that I hadn't realized was so strong in my daughter. When the piece ended, the applause was louder, more assured. It was as if our performance had woven a thread of connection through everyone present, drawing us together in appreciation of something truly special. James came over, his pride evident. "I think we might need to get a second piano at this rate," he joked, but I could tell he was seriously considering it. Eleanor approached again, this time her expression softer, more reflective. "Anna, I was wrong about you. Your love for music, for our family, it's clear. I'm sorry for any harsh words I've said." I was taken aback by her apology, the sincerity in her voice unmistakable. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means a lot coming from you. Maybe we can start fresh?" She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'd like that. Very much." The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter, conversation, and even more music. Lily and I played a few more pieces, each one drawing cheers and applause from our guests. It felt like a turning point, a bridge mended through the power of music and a shared moment of vulnerability. It's been a while since that unforgettable night when music changed everything between me and Eleanor, my once daunting mother-in-law. If someone had told me back then that we'd end up close, I would have laughed it off. But here we are, and I can hardly believe it myself. Eleanor softened a lot, especially when it comes to Lily's upbringing. She's not as rigid as she used to be, and I see a warmth in her I never knew existed. These days, we often find ourselves sitting side by side at the piano, our fingers dancing over the keys in perfect harmony. It's become our thing, playing together during family get-togethers or quiet evenings at home. Who would have thought? One evening, as we finished a particularly challenging piece, I turned to Eleanor, unable to hide my grin. "Not bad for two amateurs, huh?" Eleanor actually chuckled, a sound so rare and precious it still caught me off guard. "Speak for yourself, Anna. I've always been a virtuoso in my own mind." Lily, who'd been listening, piped up from where she sat, a stack of music sheets in her lap. "Grandma, you're the best teacher. But Mom's catching up." Eleanor's gaze softened as she looked at Lily, then back at me. "We make a good team, don't we?" "Yeah, we do," I agreed, feeling a surge of pride. Not just in our music, but in how far we'd come, from cautious adversaries to partners in crime at the piano. James, ever the supportive husband and son, would often sit back with a contented smile, watching us. "You three are something else," he'd say, and I knew he meant every word. Eleanor and we talk a lot more now. Not just about music, but about life, love, and everything in between. She's opened up about the challenges of raising her kids alone, and I've shared my fears and dreams for Lily. These conversations, once unimaginable, have become a cherished part of our relationship. "Anna," Eleanor said one night, after Lily had gone to bed, "I was too harsh on you before. You brought something special into this family." Hearing those words, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means the world to me. We've come a long way, Eleanor and I." From tension and misunderstanding to respect and genuine affection. It's not always perfect, but the progress we've made is undeniable. And much of it, we owe to those evenings at the piano, where, through the universal language of music, we found a way to understand each other.
I thought I had it all figured out. The perfect bakery, the perfect marriage, the perfect life. But as I walked into my bakery that fateful morning, I realized everything I thought I knew was about to crumble. The chalkboard sign outside my bakery, Julianne's Artisan Breads, usually greeted customers with a cheerful message. But this morning, the words scrawled across it made my heart sink. You think you've baked the sweet life, Julianne, but I'm about to add some sour. I stared at the ominous message, my fingers trembling as I unlocked the front door. What did this mean? Who was threatening me? As I stepped inside, the familiar aroma of freshly baked bread did little to calm my nerves. Carlos, did you see this? I called out to my most trusted employee who was already busy preparing for the day's baking. Carlos emerged from the back, wiping the flour from his hands. Sigh, Julianne, I found it when I arrived this morning. Any idea who could be behind this? I shook my head, trying to maintain my composure. No, not a clue, but I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Just then, the sound of the bell above the front door announced the arrival of my husband, Brett. I watched as he strode in, his usual charming smile in place. Morning, honey. He leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head, unable to hide my distress. Brett, did you see the message on the chalkboard? His brow furrowed in concern. What message? I just got here. I recounted the ominous warning, searching his face for any sign of recognition or guilt. Do you have any idea who might be behind this? Brett's eyes widened, and he placed a comforting hand on my arm. Julianne, I'm as shocked as you are. This is clearly some kind of twisted prank. Don't worry, we'll figure it out together. I wanted to believe him, but something in the way he avoided my gaze made me uneasy. Before I could press him further, the bell above the door chimed again and my assistant Elena strode in. Good morning, Julianne. She greeted me with a bright smile. And hello, Brett. Did you two see the message out front? Isn't it just dreadful? The way she glanced at Brett as she spoke sent a chill down my spine. Had they planned this together? I studied their interactions, searching for any sign of familiarity beyond what was appropriate between an employee and her boss's husband. Yes, we saw it, I replied, my voice tight. I'm going to call the police and see if they can shed any light on this. Oh, Julianne, I'm sure it's just a silly prank, Elena said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Let's not overreact. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. But as I looked into her eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she was letting on. And the way Brett's gaze kept shifting between us only heightened my suspicion. Something was wrong, very wrong. And I was determined to get to the bottom of it, no matter the cost. The rest of that day was a blur as I tried to make sense of the cryptic message and my growing suspicions about Brett and Elena. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. As I went about my usual bakery routine, I found myself scrutinizing every interaction between my husband and my assistant. The way their eyes would linger on each other, the subtle shifts in their body language, it all felt like a betrayal. That evening, after the bakery had closed and Carlos had gone home, I approached Brett in our modest apartment above the shop. We need to talk, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. Brett looked up from the newspaper he was reading, his brow furrowing in concern. What's wrong, honey? Don't honey me, I snapped. I want to know what's going on between you and Elena. His eyes widened, and he quickly folded the newspaper, setting it aside. I have no idea what you're talking about. Elena's my employee, nothing more. I narrowed my eyes, studying his face for any sign of deception. Really? Because I've noticed the way you two look at each other, the way you've been spending more time with her, even when it's not necessary for the bakery. Brett let out a heavy sigh and ran a hand through his hair. Julianne, you're being ridiculous. Elena is simply a hard-working employee who I value. There's nothing going on between us. I don't believe you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I think you and Elena are plotting something against me and my bakery. Brett's eyes widened, and for a moment he looked genuinely shocked. Julianne, how could you even think that? I love you, and this bakery is our dream. Why would I ever want to betray that? I don't know, I admitted, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. But that message on the chalkboard and the way you two have been acting, it all feels like a betrayal. Brett reached out to me, but I flinched away from his touch. Julianne, please, you have to believe me. I would never do anything to hurt you or our bakery. You're the most important thing in the world to me. I shook my head, unwilling to accept his reassurances. I want you to leave. I can't be around you right now. Julianne, please, Brett pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. Don't do this. Let's talk it through. I love you and I would never betray you. But I had made up my mind. Just go, Brett. I need time to think. As he reluctantly gathered his things and left the apartment, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a deep ache in my chest. Had I really just kicked my husband out? What if I was wrong about all of this? I sank down onto the couch, burying my face in my hands as the tears finally broke free. Everything I thought I knew was crumbling, and I had no idea what to do next. One thing was certain, though. I had to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't let Brett and Alina get away with whatever they were plotting. My bakery, my life, was on the line, and I was determined to fight for it, no matter the cost. As I sat alone in the apartment, the weight of my confrontation with Brett hung heavy in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that he and Alina were up to something, but I needed more proof. I knew I couldn't take them on alone, not with the power they held over my bakery. That's when I remembered my next-door neighbor, Maggie. She was a sharp-witted lawyer, and I knew she would be just the person I needed to help me uncover the truth. I hurried downstairs and across the street to Maggie's house, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. I knocked on her door, and she answered, her brow furrowing with concern as she took in my disheveled appearance. Julianne, what's wrong? She asked, ushering me inside. I quickly explained the situation, the cryptic message, my suspicions about Brett and Elena, and the confrontation in our apartment. Maggie's eyes widened with surprise. Wow, Julianne, that's a lot to take in. But I have to say, your instincts sound right on the money. There's definitely something fishy going on. I know, I said, wringing my hands. I just don't know what to do. I can't lose my bakery, Maggie. It's my life's work, and I can't let Brett and Alina take it from me. Maggie placed a reassuring hand on my arm. Don't worry, Julianne. I'm here to help. We'll get to the bottom of this, and I'll make sure you keep your bakery. I felt a surge of relief at her words. Thank you, Maggie. I don't know what I'd do without you. Just then, the sound of a car pulling up outside caught our attention. I peered out the window and recognized Carlos, one of my most trusted bakery employees, hurrying up the walkway. Maggie and I answered the door, and Carlos immediately launched into an urgent explanation. Julianne, I think something is very wrong. I was doing the weekly inventory, and I noticed some discrepancies in the numbers. I think Brett and Alina may be embezzling money from the bakery. My heart sank, and Maggie's eyes narrowed with determination. That's exactly what we were just talking about, Carlos. Julianne needs our help to take them down. Carlos nodded, his brow furrowed with concern. I'm with you, Julianne. This bakery is my second home, and I won't let them destroy it. The three of us huddled together, our heads bent low as we hatched a plan. Maggie would use her legal expertise to help us gather the necessary evidence, while Carlos and I would continue to monitor the bakery's finances and operations. As we parted ways, a newfound sense of purpose filled me. I may have been betrayed by the two people I trusted most, but I had the support of my allies. Together, we would take down Brett and Elena and reclaim my bakery. I returned to the apartment, my mind racing with the details of our plan. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was more determined than ever to see it through. This was my life's work, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me without a fight. As the sun began to set, I looked out over the bustling streets of our small town, a steely resolve taking hold. Brett and Alina had underestimated me, and they were about to learn a hard lesson. You don't mess with Julianne and her bakery. Over the next few weeks, Maggie, Carlos, and I executed our plan with precision and determination. We meticulously gathered evidence of Brett and Alina's embezzlement and their plans to take over my bakery. It was a delicate dance, but I was fueled by a fire that refused to be extinguished. The day of our sting operation finally arrived, and I felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation as I waited for Brett and Alina to arrive. Maggie had arranged for a select group of community leaders and influential patrons to witness the confrontation. And I knew this was our best chance to expose their betrayal. As Brett and Elena walked through the bakery doors, their expressions shifting from confusion to thinly veiled panic, I knew the game was on. "Julianne, what's going on?" Brett asked, his voice laced with apprehension. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I faced them. "Brett, Elena, I've gathered everyone here today because I have something I need to share with you in our community." I gestured to Maggie, who stepped forward, a stack of documents in her hands. "Over the past few weeks, we've uncovered evidence that you two have been embezzling funds from Julianne's bakery," Maggie announced, her voice firm and unwavering. "We have bank statements, receipts, and witness accounts that prove your involvement in a plot to take over this business." Brett's face drained of color, and Elena's eyes darted around the room, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is absurd." Brett exclaimed, his hands trembling. "Julianne, how could you do this to me, to us?" I felt a pang of sadness, but I refused to let it sway me. "Don't play the victim, Brett. We have the proof, and we're not going to let you get away with this." Elena stepped forward, her expression defiant. "You have no idea what you're up against, Julianne. This bakery is ours, and we'll do whatever it takes to keep it." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, and I knew we had struck a nerve. Maggie raised her hand, commanding the attention of the crowd. "That's where you're wrong, Elena. This bakery belongs to Julianne, and we're not going to let you or Brett take it from her. We have all the evidence we need to take this to court and ensure that justice is served." Brett and Elena exchanged a desperate look, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. They were trapped, and their carefully constructed plan was unraveling before their eyes. "You won't get away with this," Brett hissed, his eyes narrowed with fury. I stepped forward, my gaze unwavering. "Oh, but we already have. This bakery is my life's work, and I won't let you or anyone else take it from me. I'm prepared to fight for it, no matter what it takes." The room erupted in a chorus of murmurs and applause, and I knew in that moment that the tide had turned. Brett and Elena were no longer the ones in control. I was. As the community members gathered around me, offering their support and congratulations, I felt a sense of triumph wash over me. This was just the beginning of the battle, but I was more determined than ever to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The aftermath of the confrontation with Brett and Elena sent shockwaves through our tight-knit community. Word of their betrayal and my efforts to expose their scheme spread like wildfire, and suddenly I found myself at the center of a heated public debate. On one side, there were those who rallied behind me, praising my courage and determination in standing up to the deceit. They commended my actions and vowed to continue supporting my bakery. But on the other side, there were those who questioned my methods, arguing that I had gone too far in publicly humiliating my own husband and his accomplice. As I stood at the counter of my bakery, watching the steady stream of customers come and go, I couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The community I had once thought of as my family was now divided, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I had somehow crossed a line. One day, as I was preparing the dough for the day's bread, a familiar face stepped through the door. It was Maggie, her brow furrowed with concern. "Julianne, we need to talk," she said, her voice low and serious. I wiped my hands on my apron and gestured for her to follow me into the back. "What is it, Maggie?" "I've been hearing some rumblings around town," she began, her expression grave. "Some people are starting to question the way you went about this whole thing. They're saying you took it too far, that you should have handled it more discreetly." I felt my heart sink. "What? But we had the evidence, Maggie. We were just trying to protect the bakery." She placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I know, Julianne, and I stand by you. But you have to understand, not everyone sees it that way. There's a growing sentiment that you were more interested in revenge than justice." I shook my head, my hands clenching into fists. "That's not true. I was just trying to save my life's work, my legacy. How can they not see that?" Maggie sighed heavily. "I know, Julianne, but the reality is you're facing a battle on two fronts now. The legal one against Brett and Elena and the court of public opinion. And that second one could be just as dangerous. I felt a surge of frustration and despair. So what am I supposed to do, Maggie? Just let them get away with it? I can't do that, not after everything they've done. I'm not saying that, Maggie replied, her tone measured. But you need to be careful. The more you push, the more you risk alienating the very people who could be your greatest allies. Her words weighed heavily on me as I returned to the front of the bakery, my mind racing. I had thought that exposing Brett and Elena's betrayal would be the end of the battle. But now it seemed that I was facing an even greater challenge, rebuilding the trust and loyalty of my community. As the day wore on, I found myself second-guessing my actions, wondering if I had gone too far in my quest for justice. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a grave mistake in my pursuit of revenge. I knew I had to find a way to mend the fractures in my community, to show them that my actions were not driven by personal animus, but by a deep-rooted desire to protect the legacy I had built. It was going to be an uphill battle, but I was determined to come out on top, no matter the cost. In the wake of the public confrontation, the bakery became the epicenter of a heated battle for the hearts and minds of the community. On one side, there were those who rallied behind me, unwavering in their support and outrage over Brett and Elena's betrayal. But on the other, a growing faction questioned my methods and accused me of taking things too far. The battle lines were drawn, and I found myself caught in the middle, struggling to keep my bakery afloat amidst the chaos. One morning, as I was setting up the shop, the bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see a familiar face. Dean, the talented young baker I had recently hired. "Julianne, can I have a word?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I gestured for him to follow me to the back, my heart sinking with dread. "What is it, Dean?" He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on mine. "I've been hearing some troubling things around town. People are saying that you went too far in exposing Brett and Elena's betrayal. They think you should have handled it more discreetly." I felt my hands clench into fists, frustration bubbling up inside me. "Dean, you know as well as I do that Brett and Elena were plotting to take this bakery away from me. I couldn't just sit back and let that happen." He nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I understand, Julianne. I really do. But you have to understand, not everyone sees it that way. There's a growing sentiment that you were more interested in revenge than justice." I let out a bitter laugh. "Revenge? This isn't about revenge, Dean. This is about protecting my life's work, my legacy. How can they not see that?" Dean placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I believe you, Julianne. But you have to understand, the more you push back, the more you risk alienating the very people who could be your greatest allies." I shook my head, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "So what am I supposed to do, Dean? Just let them get away with it?" "No, of course not," he replied, his voice calm and measured. "But you need to be strategic about this. You need to find a way to win back the trust of the community, to show them that your actions were driven by a desire to protect, not destroy." I chewed on my lip, my mind racing, as I tried to come up with a plan. "Okay, so what do you suggest I do?" Dean's lips curved into a small smile. "Well, for starters, we could use this as an opportunity to showcase your bakery's strengths. We could host a community event, something that brings people together and reminds them of the positive impact your business has had on the town." I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope ignite within me. "That's a good idea. We could do a baking workshop, or maybe a charity event where we donate a portion of the proceeds to a local organization." "Exactly," Dean said, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "And we can use it as a chance to show the community that you're not just fighting for yourself, but for the greater good of this town." I felt a surge of gratitude towards Dean, his support and guidance a much-needed lifeline in the midst of the chaos. "Thank you, Dean. I don't know what I'd do without you." He smiled and gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "That's what friends are for. Now let's get to work on planning this event. We've got a community to win back." With a renewed sense of purpose, I rolled up my sleeves and dove headfirst into the task at hand, determined to reclaim my place in the hearts and minds of the people I had once called my own. The community event we organized was a resounding success, drawing crowds of eager participants and restoring a sense of unity and purpose within the town. As I watched people engage in baking workshops, share stories, and come together in support of local charities, I felt a cautious optimism begin to take root. However, the legal battle against Brett and Alina continued to rage on, and the strain was beginning to take its toll. Maggie worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and preparing our case. But Brett and his team of high-powered lawyers fought tooth and nail to thwart our efforts. The day of the trial arrived, and I found myself standing outside the courthouse, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. Maggie placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You ready for this, Julianne?" she asked, her voice low and serious. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this. As we entered the courtroom, I spotted Brett and Elena seated at the defense table, their expressions a mask of defiance. I steeled myself, refusing to let their presence rattle me. The proceedings began, with Maggie meticulously laying out our case, presenting the evidence we had gathered over the past months. She painted a damning picture of Brett and Elena's scheme, leaving no room for doubt. But Brett and his attorneys were relentless, throwing up roadblock after roadblock, challenging every piece of evidence and questioning the validity of our claims. At one point, the opposing counsel turned their sights on me, their questioning becoming increasingly aggressive. "Miss Julianne, isn't it true that you resorted to underhanded tactics in your quest to expose my clients?" The lawyer, a slick-haired man with a sharp, accusatory gaze, asked. I felt my hackles rise, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I did what I had to do to protect my livelihood and the legacy I've built in this community. Brett and Elena's actions left me with no other choice." "So you admit that your methods were questionable at best?" the lawyer pressed, his tone dripping with disdain. I shook my head, my eyes narrowing. "My methods were necessary to uncover the truth and prevent a greater injustice. I refuse to apologize for standing up for what's right." The lawyer's lips curled into a sneer. "And yet, the very community you claim to care about has turned against you. Isn't that proof enough that your actions were more about personal vengeance than justice?" I felt my heart sink as I glanced around the courtroom, seeing the uncertainty and skepticism etched on the faces of the onlookers. Had I truly gone too far in my quest for retribution? Before I could respond, Maggie stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Objection, Your Honor. The counsel is clearly attempting to discredit my client through irrelevant and inflammatory questioning." The judge nodded, his brow furrowed. "Sustained. The counsel will refrain from making such accusations and stick to the facts of the case." As the trial continued, I watched with bated breath as the evidence mounted against Brett and Alina. Their web of lies unraveled, exposing the depth of their betrayal and their desperate attempts to cover their tracks. In the end, the verdict was unanimous. Brett and Alina were found guilty of embezzlement and conspiracy to defraud. As the judge delivered the sentence, I felt a sense of vindication, but it was tempered by the realization that the cost of my victory had been higher than I ever imagined. As the dust settled on the trial, I found myself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication, knowing that justice had prevailed and that Brett and Alina would face the consequences of their actions. But on the other, I couldn't shake the lingering feeling of unease that had taken root within me. The community that had once rallied behind me was now fractured, with some still harboring resentment towards my methods. I knew I had to find a way to mend those wounds, to rebuild the trust and unity that had once defined our little town. One morning, as I was opening the bakery, the familiar sound of the bell above the door announced the arrival of Dean. He strode in, a determined glint in his eye. "Julianne, I've been thinking," he began, his voice tinged with excitement. "I think it's time we take the bakery in a new direction." I raised an eyebrow, my curiosity piqued. "What do you mean, Dean?" He leaned in, his expression earnest. "Well, we've been through a lot these past few months, and I think it's time we use this as an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to show the community that this bakery is about more than just bread and pastries. It's about bringing people together, about being a pillar of this town." I listened intently, feeling a spark of hope ignite within me. "I'm listening."